Each NFL franchise has one QB who led them to their first ever playoff victory. For the New Orleans Saints, that QB is Aaron Brooks.
Off the play fake, Brooks fires, end zone, touchdown! Brooks, rifle break, touchdown!
He was a natural passer with a rocket arm.
Aaron Brooks has the big arm.
That made that play was the strong arm of Aaron Brooks.
We've seen Brooks' whole repertoire today. The laser, the ephus, kid's got all the tools.
He was just as dangerous with his legs.
He's 6'4", 4'5", 40. He can run, half pocket panther and half scrambler, he calls
The
it.
X factor with this New Orleans Saints offense is the quarterback, Aaron Brooks.
That dual threat ability must have run in the family.
You know, Brooks' second cousin is Michael Vick, and he's got some of his chops, doesn't he, Dan?
Oh, Michael Vick's got nothing on his older cousin. He was looking funny, had him lined up, and he just shook right by him. Ashley Ambrose finally wrapped him up.
For a brief period, Aaron Brooks was all over the Saints record book.
And that's a record-breaking touchdown for Aaron Brooks.
It is. Now holds the record in the Saints franchise for the most touchdown passes.
Yet there was one thing that kept him from being great.
As I've studied Aaron Brooks through his career, he must become more consistent.
The most consistent thing he's done has been inconsistent.
He could throw for 300 yards or 3 interceptions. Either way, you were getting a show. And when the lights were bright and the pressure was on, you liked Aaron Brooks under center.
This guy leads the NFL in fourth quarter QB rating. You see there at 108.2.
How about this for your first playoff game for Aaron Brooks? 4 touchdown passes.
And listening to Bill Belichick all week, listening to him over the weekend, talking to him, who did he fear? Aaron Brooks and his arm.
But as the predecessor to Drew Brees, Aaron Brooks has been largely lost to history. Never perfect, rarely predictable, but as exciting as they come.
Sometimes they wonder what I'm doing back there or where I'm going.
Let's jog your memory. Growing up in Newport News, Aaron Brooks was one of the best athletes in the state of Virginia during his teen years at Ferguson High. Not only was he a standout football player, but he was also one of Virginia's best basketball players, at a time when Allen Iverson was building his own name. On the gridiron, the Mariners weren't that good, and teams put all their focus on Aaron Brooks, so his numbers didn't jump off the page. But he was a threat. His size and athleticism, along with his ability as a passer and runner, made him a top quarterback prospect in the state. A lot of programs were interested, but Brooks didn't want to go far, so he stayed home and committed to the Virginia Cavaliers.
It was close to the crib too, so it was like, we ain't got no paper, we ain't got no money. I couldn't. I could go to Florida State, Miami, UCLA, Notre Dame. I couldn't do all that. I mean, I probably could, but I might have been miserable. So I was like, somebody can get me to school if I needed to.
Aaron Brooks impressed over the summer, playing great in camp and showing off his cannon of an arm. And while Brooks felt like Virginia would give him an opportunity to get meaningful playing time, it wouldn't be as a freshman. Brooks knew he had no chance to start in year 1, so he asked to be redshirted. Head coach George Welsh was way ahead of him, so Aaron Brooks' Cavaliers career would begin in 1995. However, Virginia wasn't going to rush it, so while Brooks was dressing on Saturdays, he was dressing for the sideline. As the team's third-string QB, Virginia turned in a 9-4 season and capped it off with a Peach Bowl victory over Georgia. Yet Brooks didn't have much of a role, appearing in just one game as he finished his first season attempting just 2 passes, yet still throwing 1 interception. Last year, Aaron Brooks had lost out on the backup job to Tim Sherman. This year, he began the season as the backup to Sherman, yet Brooks still felt like he could move up the depth chart as long as he had a chance, and Welsh would give him plenty of chances.
But that Aaron Brooks, who's a young quarterback and short on experience, but Tom O'Brien, the offensive coordinator, he tried to get him into games every single time they played.
But when we talked to George Welch, he said, you know, you'll see me shift these fellas back and forth.
Brooks saw action in every game, but he never made his way into a starting role. Aaron Brooks was bigger and more mobile, used especially in goal line situations. Yet all in all, he wasn't great, but he was more dynamic.
A little more gifted athletically is Aaron Brooks. He can get outside the contain a little bit better sometimes than Tim Sherman.
Yet with that being said, Sherman wasn't much better. The 2 quarterbacks combined for 4 touchdowns and 18 interceptions on the year. And that was a shame, Because Virginia had a national championship caliber team everywhere else. In the backfield, they had a Heisman candidate running back in Tiki Barber. His twin Rondé was in the defensive backfield. And with 2 elite linebackers in James Ferrier and Jamie Sharper, Virginia should have finished a lot better than 7-4, especially since they started the year with 4 convincing wins. But the instability and overall subpar play at the quarterback position really held them back. But at least they would win enough games to get a bid to the CarQuest Bowl to take on Miami. Sherman started the game, but the offense was stagnant, so late in the first, Welsh gave Brooks a chance.
3:17 to go, first period. Brooks is going deep into the end zone.
What a catch.
It's a touchdown!
What a catch.
What a grab by Jermaine Crowell!
The sophomore comes in and throws a touchdown on his first series to get the Cavs on the board. On Virginia's very next series, Brooks was inexplicably back on the sideline. Well, there may have been an explanation.
Why isn't Aaron Brooks in this game? I mean, he did a tremendous job in the series he was in there, threw for a great touchdown reception to Jermaine Crowell. How come they took him out of this football game? He's the hot hand, the hot quarterback. Stay with the hot guy.
You know, you would expect this to be controversial. Tim Sherman, the son of receivers coach Tom Sherman. There are those who think he has favoritism. Welch completely denies it, of course.
So Brooks spent the rest of the first half watching. But after a blocked punt put Virginia on Miami's goal line early in the third, Brooks got back in.
So they wouldn't be without. They're going to go to the same play again and get the touchdown again with Aaron Brooks.
Another touchdown. Brooks stayed in the game for good after this. He held his own, but he couldn't get much else going against a tough Hurricanes defense. And Virginia left the CarQuest Bowl empty-handed, as Brooks wrapped up his sophomore year with 517 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 7 picks, along with 65 rushing yards and 4 more touchdowns on the ground. It wasn't the ending they wanted, but Aaron Brooks had played well against one of the nation's top defenses. Sherman was graduated, so as a junior, Brooks would have no one in front of him for the QB job. He was confident and was ready to be a leader. Welsh couldn't help but notice that confidence too. Aaron Brooks seemed in control of his team. However, for Virginia, those other great players mentioned earlier had all left for the pros. So Aaron Brooks was Virginia's signal caller. He didn't have Tiki Barber in the backfield, but he had the next best thing in a sophomore Thomas Jones. And he had a go-to guy on the outside in senior receiver Jermaine Crowell. And excitement was high after Brooks threw for over 300 yards in his first game as a starter against Auburn. Yet it ended in defeat. And overall, there was no denying that the Cavaliers had lost a lot of firepower on both sides of the ball. A less than stellar O-line made it hard to get the run game going, which in turn limited the pass game and left the Cavaliers very predictable. And Brooks' play was declining. That confidence from the preseason had seemed to have disappeared.
Last 2 times they've come off, he has gone to the sideline phones, talked to the coaches upstairs, lowered his head, and walked away. Well, Mike, that's what Sparky Woods, the offensive coordinator, talked about. He said, I know he's worked hard, so I know he's going to go into the game confident. I want him to come out.
After 7 games, he had thrown just 6 touchdowns, to go with 6 interceptions, and the Cavs were a mediocre 4-3. But there'd be no QB rotation this year. Welsh was going to stick with Brooks, and the man that knows himself best assured everyone that there were no confidence issues. Then something clicked for the signal caller. Virginia averaged over 35 points and went 3-1 in their final 4. Aaron Brooks played with near-perfect efficiency, passing for 14 touchdowns and 1 interception during that stretch. He even ended the year as the team leader in rushing touchdowns. And after throwing for a school record 390 yards along with 4 touchdowns, Brooks and Virginia capped off their season with a big win over in-state rival Virginia Tech to secure another 7-win campaign. However, this year, there would be no bowl game, and Brooks' first year as a starter would end with him throwing for 2,282 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, while adding 255 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Virginia definitely didn't have as much talent in '97, but that late season surge helped them win just as many games as '96. Brooks wasn't going to make any overly ambitious predictions for '98, but the senior was confident that they'd definitely be better. Yet while it seemed Brooks had proved himself last year, He still had plenty of critics doubting his ability to repeat his individual success in 1998, but the outside noise didn't bother him. Aaron Brooks was used to adversity. Virginia's offense had some improvements and some losses. A much improved rushing attack was led by Thomas Jones, who looked like a whole new back in '98, leading the ACC in rushing. But Brooks' top target, Jermaine Crowell, had graduated. Luckily, he would quickly find a new favorite receiver in senior Terrence Wilkins. And with Virginia fielding a more experienced team, they seemed poised for success. Brooks put up pretty similar yardage through the air in '98, but with Thomas Jones emerging as such a threat behind an improved O-line, a lot of red zone scores came on the ground, with Brooks being responsible for 5 of his own. Yet through the air, he only passed for about half the touchdowns he did last year. But regardless of where it came from, the Cavaliers were putting up points and would win their first 5 games, even finding themselves ranked in the top 10. Aaron Brooks wasn't putting up eye-popping numbers, but he was quarterbacking the team well.
And now watch Aaron Brooks. They've been after him all night. He's looking for Terrence Wilkins. Now watch him wheel his eyes around, and strong enough arm to get the ball out to Kevin Coffey. Wasn't there a song, "What a Difference a Year Makes"? Or maybe it was "A Difference a Day Makes." But Aaron Brooks, you see him settle in the pocket.
He still made some bad decisions and had a tendency to do too much, but that was also what set him apart.
And a well-thrown ball by Aaron Brooks. Sparky Wood said he turned a bad play into a good one.
Brooks and the passing attack got better as the season went on, and while the Cavaliers experienced a couple losses down the stretch, they still put together a 9-win season, and again ended the year strong with a huge comeback win over Virginia Tech, after Brooks threw for 3 second-half touchdowns. This year they would get a bowl bid. The Peach Bowl versus Georgia would be the final game of Aaron Brooks in a Cavaliers uniform. It was all Virginia in the first half. They threw some haymakers and looked to be running away with it. Going into halftime with a 21-7 lead, Georgia completely swung the momentum in the third and tied it. Brooks and Virginia finally answered late in the quarter, but a missed extra point had Virginia up by just 6 heading into the fourth. The Bulldogs scored the first 2 touchdowns of the final quarter. Then on 3rd and long, with a minute and a half left, Brooks put Virginia in a position to tie it up.
To go. Got him spread out. He's got room to run. He's got 20 to run.
A 30-yard touchdown run put the Cavaliers within 2, but the convert was no good. Virginia got one more chance after recovering an onside kick. Brooks put them in position for the win. But the game-winning field goal went wide right.
It's on its way! Oh.
Brooks finished with over 220 pass yards, over 110 rush yards, and 4 total touchdowns. Yet Virginia had let the Peach Bowl and a 10-win season slip away, as Brooks ended his senior year with 2,319 yards through the air, along with 12 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, while rushing for 227 yards and 5 more touchdowns. Aaron Brooks' college career was over. He was leaving Virginia as one of the best quarterbacks in school history. It wasn't exactly what he wanted, but it was an accomplishment nonetheless. And as he had shown in the CarQuest Bowl as a sophomore, and now again in the Peach Bowl, Aaron Brooks was a gamer. When the lights were bright and the pressure was on, Brooks turned it up. He was drawing some flattering comparisons, just not as a pure QB.
Aaron Brooks is probably the next Cordell Stewart in some pro team's situation. He runs a 4.5 40, he vertical jumps 40 inches, he throws the ball, he's accurate.
Aaron Brooks wasn't at the top of anyone's draft board, so he had to try and improve his stock, starting with the combine. Athletically, he impressed, but that was about where the positives ended in the eyes of most pro scouts.
He was not a starter till his junior year at the University of Virginia. Scouts thought he was too timid, too shy to lead an NFL team. Not a single NFL team worked him out privately. He didn't fare well on the Wonderlic test, which is given to all NFL prospects. So he was the 9th quarterback taken in the draft.
Unsurprisingly, it took some time for Brooks to get the call, but in the 4th round of the 1999 NFL Draft, Aaron Brooks was selected by the Green Bay Packers, and then essentially went on to relive his freshman year at Virginia. The Packers had Brett Favre. A 4th-round rookie had no chance of taking his job, and as it turned out, had no chance of taking the field. Aaron Brooks spent his entire rookie season on the sidelines, never taking a single snap for the Packers. Over the offseason, the Packers packaged Brooks to the Saints as the second-year signal caller joined a New Orleans team going full overhaul.
Second, they brought in 38 new players. Half of the starters out there today were guys who weren't even here last year.
The Saints were coming off a 3-13 season, so they did a full reset going into the new millennium. They brought in a new head coach in Jim Haslett, and while they made a lot of roster changes, they did keep some top players. There was safety Sammy Knight and dominant defensive tackle Leroy Glover. Then on offense, they still had Ricky Williams in the backfield. But after that, it was mostly new faces. They brought in former Kansas City Chief Joe Horn, who would break out in 2000. And then there was the quarterback position, except we're not talking Brooks. New Orleans had also brought in former Pro Bowler Jeff Blake to be their starting QB. So Brooks again didn't look like he'd see the field in year 2, but he had earned the backup spot. So if anything happened to Blake, Brooks would be next man up. Then late in the first quarter of a Week 12 game versus Oakland, Jeff Blake went down, and number 2 became QB1. Aaron Brooks was ready. He completed his very first pass to Charles Woodson, who played for the Raiders. But on the next series, Aaron Brooks redeemed himself.
The fake to the left and the throw, and wide open. Streaking in his way to the 10, the 5, touchdown, Willie Jackson.
His real first completion, a 53-yard touchdown pass to Willie Jackson. Brooks would add another touchdown in garbage time, yet the Saints lost. It ended a 6-game win streak. Jeff Blake was out for the season. Ricky Williams had been lost for the year the week prior. Now it was up to Aaron Brooks to keep the Saints in the playoff hunt. The following week, he threw for a touchdown and added 2 more on the ground, his second rushing touchdown being the difference maker in a huge win over the defending champion St. Louis Rams. The week after that, he threw for a career-high 441 yards. The next week, he went for a career-high 108 yards on the ground. Aaron Brooks wasn't just filling in, he was balling out and was giving shades of another dual-threat QB who just happened to be his favorite player.
Aaron Brooks reminds me a lot of Randall Cunningham. They have about the same type of body and the speed and elusiveness to get outside.
His Pro Bowl wideout liked his arm and his cool head. Brooks led the Saints to a 3-3 record in their final 6. It wasn't perfect, but with a 10-6 finish, the Saints locked up just their second division title in franchise history. New Orleans got another matchup with St. Louis in the wild card, and if the pressure of the playoffs wasn't enough for a young QB, Aaron Brooks had decades of disappointment resting on his shoulders.
Meanwhile, the Saints went 0 for the 1900s in playoff wins. They've been in the league 34 years. They've never won a playoff game.
It wasn't looking good for New Orleans after Joe Horn was knocked out for the game on their first possession. Then the Rams scored on their first possession. But Brooks wasn't shaken. He marched the Saints downfield and answered with a touchdown strike of his own. At halftime, St. Louis held a 3-point advantage. But in the second half, Brooks started heating up. He threw for the only touchdown of the third quarter. Then early in the fourth, he tossed touchdown number 3. A quick turnover got the ball right back in Brooks' hands, and he found Willie Jackson for his 4th touchdown pass of the game.
How about this for your first playoff game for Aaron Brooks? 4 touchdown passes.
St. Louis made a big push down the stretch, but it was too little, too late. The Saints held on. Brooks continued showing up in the big games and had etched his name in Saints history as the QB who led the franchise to its first ever playoff victory. Brooks played solid in the divisional with 286 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks, along with 69 yards on the ground. But a lot of that came after the high-powered Vikings offense had put the game out of reach, as the Cinderella season came to an end, and Brooks wrapped up his year with 1,514 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, while adding 170 yards and 2 more touchdowns on the ground. So Brooks had started the 2000 season as Jeff Blake's backup, but going into the 01 season, it was the other way around. Brooks had silenced a lot of critics. His poor score on the Wonderlic had really hurt him in the draft process, but the classroom and the football field are 2 different things. and offensive coordinator Mike McCarthy said that he had no problem picking up the offense. Now he had an entire training camp taking first-team reps. He looked great. The players were rallying behind him. It was Aaron Brooks' team. The Saints were ready to build on their 10-win season. Joe Horn was healthy, Ricky Williams was healthy, and they had their man under center. Brooks came out in Week 1 and threw for 3 touchdowns in a win over Buffalo. He carved up the Rams for another 3 touchdowns in Week 6 to push the Saints to 4-2 on the season. But it hadn't been perfect. Aaron Brooks was making a lot of avoidable mistakes. He was one of the most sacked QBs in the league and was without his top lineman most of the year, but he did have a tendency to hold onto the ball too long. Conversely, he had a lot of trouble holding onto the ball. His ball security was a glaring issue. Although they weren't resulting in many turnovers, you could pretty much guarantee Brooks mishandling a snap or coughing up the ball each game.
It goes back to what we said at the beginning. Hazlitt said he is still young. He's going to have his growing pains, but that seems like just the most basic thing to a quarterback, taking the snap.
But all in all, Brooks looked solid for most of the season. He was extending plays with his legs. He was throwing touchdowns and keeping his interceptions low. His career-high 3,832 passing yards was a top 5 mark in the NFL. The Saints were 7-5 after 12 and looked poised for a playoff return. But then Brooks went ice cold. Over the final 4 games of the season, he threw 13 interceptions, after throwing just 9 prior to this. The Saints watched the doors shut on their playoff hopes, and Brooks closed out his collapse with 4 picks against the Niners in a shutout loss, which dropped the Saints' final record to 7-9. As for Brooks' entire season, he threw for 3,832 yards, along with 26 touchdowns and 22 interceptions, while adding 358 yards and another touchdown on the ground. Aaron Brooks wasn't a Pro Bowler, but he would be in Hawaii after the season, competing in the QB Skills Challenge, and surprising many by finishing as the runner-up, and unsurprisingly recording the longest throw.
Oh, look at this! 73 yards.
But at times, Aaron Brooks had looked like a Pro Bowl caliber player. His elusiveness and ability to extend plays had even led to his GM calling him Houdini. But over the final 4 weeks, the Saints' Houdini had done his best disappearing act, and he'd need a new trick for 2002. Brooks had a nightmare end to last season, but it was also a team collapse. One thing Brooks felt was missing was leadership. It was a role he had been reluctant to step into last year, but this year, he was going to be that guy. Then training camp hit, and Brooks wasn't happy. He was on a contract year and wanted a lucrative deal. He expected it to be done already. He felt he was a star QB, and he deserved priority. New Orleans made him wait, but the day before the season started, he got what he wanted, and he was happy and ready to lead an offense that had made some big changes. Mainly that Ricky Williams had been traded to Miami, but waiting in the wings was a second-year back named Deuce McAllister, who quickly had fans forgetting about Williams. So Brooks had a run game. He had Joe Horn, and he had a new rookie speedster in Dante Stallworth, so he couldn't have excuses. And year 4 Brooks was playing better. He was acting as more of a pocket passer. He'd still use his legs when he had to, but it was often just to buy him more time to find a man downfield. And he was building a reputation as a closer.
Fourth quarter has been Aaron Brooks' quarter all year long. I mean, remember, this team has been behind in a lot of football games, and this guy leads the NFL in fourth quarter QB rating. You see there at 108.2, makes his biggest plays in the fourth quarter.
Aaron Brooks was the QB for one of the most high-powered offenses in the league. New Orleans had ended last season with embarrassing losses to Washington and Tampa Bay. In their first 2 meetings this year, Brooks threw for a combined 6 touchdowns and just 1 interception. The Saints won both to bring their record to 6-1 after 7 games. It was a term rarely mentioned in New Orleans, but it looked like they had a franchise QB. Next up was a family affair.
Bragging rights on the line now for the cousins, Vick and Brooks.
It was the first matchup between the cousins. The teams went back and forth. Vick threw for $195 and did a lot of damage with his legs, totaling nearly 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And he won the battle with Brooks, who, while throwing 2 touchdowns, also threw for less yards than Vick and 2 interceptions. And the Falcons won it on the final play.
have come into New Orleans and knocked off the Saints.
I think he'll add that one to his portfolio.
Then after this loss, the Saints could never again find their footing. Brooks wouldn't have the same collapse as last year. He was second in the league in touchdown passes with the Saints franchise record 27 and had cut his interceptions to 15, but he wasn't efficient. His completion percentage was another big concern last season. Coaches chalked it up to inexperience. That could no longer be the excuse for the self-proclaimed star QB, and a career-low 53.6 completion percentage wasn't going to cut it. The Saints again looked like they were on their way to the playoffs after 2 straight wins put them at 9-4, but then they lost their final 3, each by 7 points or less. Their final loss of the season knocked them out of playoff contention, and Brooks ended his year with 3,572 pass yards, 27 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions, while adding 253 rush yards and 2 more touchdowns. So Brooks had struggled, but he was also hurting, playing a lot of last season with a detached tendon in his throwing shoulder. He would undergo surgery to repair it shortly after the season, and with an entire offseason to recover, 2003 was going to be Aaron Brooks' year. Unlike the past 2 seasons, New Orleans got out to a slow start. After 5 games, they were 1-4. Their season looked lost before it had really started, but Aaron Brooks was playing some of his best football, and eventually, the wins started coming. Brooks had never been more efficient as a passer. Last year was a career-low completion percentage. This year, it was a career high. He was top 7 in touchdown passes for the 3rd consecutive season, and the most impressive stat was his interceptions. In 10 of his 16 games, Aaron Brooks did not throw an interception. Overall, his 8 picks would be a career low as a full-time starter. But he wasn't without his turnovers. The fumbles were still a big issue. Yet there was a bit of a method to Brooks' madness.
He's had fumbles. He's lost 11 fumbles. But 4 of those 11 fumbles, Kurt, have come on 3rd down. And 3rd down is where the Saints are at their best. And I think part of the reason they're so good on 3rd down is because Aaron Brooks will hang in there, hang in the pocket, and let the play develop downfield, where a lot of other quarterbacks will just dump it off.
So after their rough start, the Saints made up some ground. They kept themselves alive in the playoff hunt. They needed to win their last 3 games to even have a chance. In Week 15 against the Giants, Brooks had one of the best games of his career.
Gone. Now Brooks is going to unload. Horn, touchdown! Brooks with time, rifles, touchdown and goal. Brooks, Horn, touchdown! Brooks down the middle, touchdown! He has thrown the football as well as I have seen a quarterback. The last time we saw somebody throw the ball that well, Peyton Manning was right in this dome against the New Orleans Saints.
The Saints QB picked apart New York for a career-high 5 touchdowns. The next week versus Jacksonville, they needed a miracle to keep their season alive.
And they got it. Jerome Payton with the catch. He dives into the end zone for the touchdown.
One of the most unlikely sequences of all time had New Orleans in a perfect position to force overtime, but we all know what happened next.
Here's Mitch Berger, the holder. And he missed it!
The Saints closed out the season with a win against Dallas, but it didn't matter. The Jacksonville loss had already ended their playoff chances, as Brooks finished his career year with 3,546 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, while rushing for 175 yards and 2 more touchdowns. Brooks had the best year of his career, yet there were still mixed opinions, especially after his former backup Jake Delhomme had led the Panthers to the Super Bowl in his first year with the team. But what's done is done, and all Aaron Brooks and the Saints could do was focus on playing better in 2004. It was the regular offensive producers this season, Joe Horn as option number 1, an improving Dante Stallworth taking some of the pressure off of him, and McAllister in the backfield. Brooks was a 6th-year QB at this point, and Saints fans felt like every year they were waiting for him to take that next step. He had a solid start to the season, but it wasn't spectacular, and New Orleans again found themselves in an uphill battle. Brooks had all the talent in the world, but he was unpredictable, and that was his biggest flaw.
But to be a great player, you got to do it on a consistent basis. And that's something that Aaron hasn't done. And you see the inconsistency, not from game to game, sometimes it's from quarter to quarter, series to series. That's the thing that Aaron has to understand and what a great player is in this league. It's all about consistency.
Although he had the mobility to make plays on the ground, he now rarely used his legs past the line of scrimmage. And he was throwing the ball a lot, like in a Week 11 loss to Denver when Brooks went 34 of 60 through the air. Again, not completing the amount of passes you'd like. And then there were some plays that just made absolutely no sense.
Now 3rd and 10, Brooks in trouble. And throws it backwards. This is a live ball.
Just going to turn around and throw the ball. I think it's Wayne Gandy right there, and he's like, who are you throwing it to?
However, Brooks would still make Saints history.
Brooks also became the first ever Saints quarterback to throw for at least 3,000 yards and fire up 20 TD passes in 4 consecutive years.
The team really hit a rough patch to begin the second half of the season. And while Brooks faced a lot of the blame, there were other reasons for the struggles.
Now, we'll say this. I'll give him some credit here. Cut him a little slack. The offensive line play this year was not very good, and he was playing with his top player, and Deuce McAllister, hurt for most part of this season.
And then you had some experts that were questioning if Brooks really wanted to be in New Orleans.
There was a time earlier in the season where I was very convinced that he did not want to be here anymore. And he would even say, I just can't do it.
Yet, like clockwork, the Saints kept themselves in the playoff chase until the very end. After 12 games, they were 4-8 and coming off 3 straight losses. But New Orleans wouldn't lose again, and the constantly scrutinized Brooks loved it.
Laughing at him. Laughing at all y'all. Laughing at all y'all. Because if everyone down in St. Louis lose today, win the playoffs. What they think about that, fake experts?
Unfortunately, some confusing tiebreakers would keep them out of the postseason yet again, and Brooks finished his year by passing for 3,810 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions, while rushing for 173 yards and 4 touchdowns. Mike McCarthy left in the offseason. The Saints brought in Mike Shepard, and Shepard was focused on helping out his quarterback. For the past 5 years under McCarthy, Brooks was expected to mostly operate out of the pocket, but Brooks was one of the most mobile QBs in the league. Shepard knew that, so the plan for 05 was simplify the playbook and let Aaron Brooks be Aaron Brooks.
Katrina formed on Wednesday, August 24th, 2005.
Here's the storm as it moves on up.
Yesterday, I signed a disaster declaration for the state of Louisiana.
Every person is hereby ordered to immediately evacuate the city of New Orleans.
So from the jump, this wasn't going to be a normal season for the New Orleans Saints. The Superdome was ruined. They never had a true home game, either playing at the Alamo Dome, Tiger Stadium, or on the road. The overall impact caused by Hurricane Katrina was unfathomable and took a toll on everyone. But the team still had a season to play. Brooks was actually running less than he ever had been, yet he was making the runs count with a career-high 6.2 yards per carry. But through the air, he was struggling. McAllister went down early, and without an effective ground game, teams forced Brooks to beat them with his arm. A simplified playbook only made them more predictable, and Brooks' decision-making still left a lot to be desired. However, a Week 11 loss to the Patriots would see Brooks make a little more history.
And that's a record-breaking touchdown for Aaron Brooks. It is. Now holds the record in the Saints franchise for the most touchdown passes.
But all in all, there were very few high points for any members of the Saints this season. The travel due to Katrina made it hard for the players to rest properly. They did start 2-2, but then everything fell apart. New Orleans managed 1 victory over their final 12. With 3 games left in the season, Aaron Brooks was benched. And this year, there was no confusion. The 3-13 Saints were never in playoff contention, and Brooks ended his season with 2,882 pass yards, 13 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions, while adding 281 rush yards and 2 more touchdowns. Brooks had been solid for New Orleans. He had some great moments over the years, but it seemed the Saints had reached their peak with Brooks at QB. A change was coming. In mid-March, the Saints signed some guy named Drew Brees. The writing was on the wall, and the following day, Aaron Brooks was a free agent, but he still had value. Aaron Brooks signed with the Oakland Raiders, and he hoped for a career resurgence. He couldn't have asked for a better top target, as Oakland had brought in Randy Moss the year prior. But this season would be anything but resurgent for Aaron Brooks. He spent most of his Raiders debut on his back after being sacked 7 times in the season opener. The following week, he injured his pec and would miss the next 7 games. He came back to an anemic Raiders offense and didn't really have any success the rest of the way. The Raiders finished at 2-14, the worst record in the NFL, and Brooks finished his injury-shortened season with 1,105 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, while rushing for another 124 yards. And one season in Oakland is all Aaron Brooks would get. With the team set to draft Jamarcus Russell, they cut ties with the 8th-year QB, and that would quietly be the end of Aaron Brooks' career. Maybe not the greatest career, but Aaron Brooks overcame adversity. Whether in college or the pros, he stayed patient, stayed ready, and capitalized on his opportunity. And he was an active community member in New Orleans.
My wife and I gave that city all we had, as far as foundation, we supported literacy.
Amen.
We partnered up with the local libraries to get the kids rights to get library cards and had them to a pledge to read 10 books.
He would even be inducted into the Saints Hall of Fame in 2014. Aaron Brooks was part of a new generation of dual-threat QBs, yet is also one of the most overlooked. At a time when the NFL had the Vicks, the McNairs, and the Culpeppers, Aaron Brooks was a guy who could do everything they could. He remains one of the greatest QBs in Saints history, and quarterbacking them to their first ever playoff victory is something that can never be taken away. His raw talent carried him far, but he didn't reach that level of refinement and consistency that could have made him a star. But there were plenty of games where he played like one. It could be a highlight, or it could be head-scratching. But Aaron Brooks was going to get you out of your seat, one way or another. But that's it for today's episode on Aaron Brooks. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on another University of Virginia star, or this one on another dual-threat QB. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.